Coming up, does Alabama have extra motivation again this Saturday? And is Auburn's athletic director in trouble? We'll try to decide it all next, coming up on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American. We are loaded on today's show. Coming up about 40 minutes from right now, we'll talk to Brandon Walker from SEC Country about the big Auburn-Mississippi State game coming up on Saturday. Less than 20 minutes from right now, we'll say hello to Alex Hickey, who covers LSU for SEC Country, about a little quarterback controversy there in Baton Rouge. A lot of fun. We'll also take a look back into a great season in recent SEC history. Should be a fun 60 minutes, including lots of comments in the comment section as well.
There's never any shortage of storylines, especially right now. We haven't even turned the calendar to October yet, and so just all this stuff's coming at us, and I love us dealing with it one by one in the first and 10.
So I'll remind you here that AT&T SEC Country Live brought to you by AT&T. AT&T proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. And as Mike said, let's dive into our first and 10 with the big news around the SEC. Item number one on the list. We actually talked about this during the offseason, and as a former Alabama player, I'm really curious to get your perspective on this. Jonathan Allen, the former great Alabama player, was on our Alabama podcast here at SEC Country. And the host, Ryan Fowler, asked him, hey, where do you rank the Alabama rivals? And he gave him the choice between Auburn and LSU. Well, when Allen answered that question, he actually gave a little bit of a surprising answer because his top choice for the biggest rivalry for Alabama wasn't Auburn or LSU. It's actually the team that Alabama plays this Saturday. Here's what Allen said then as a reminder to set up our conversation.
Jonathan, how would you rank the rivals in Alabama as from a player perspective? Is it Auburn that's the biggest rival? Is it LSU? Is it Tennessee? I mean, I'm just talking about current day. How would you rank the rivals on Alabama's schedule?
I would say Ole Miss. For me personally, Ole Miss is number one by far.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? I'm just curious. I mean, now you got me. What is Ole Miss? I'm just curious.
They beat us twice.
Okay.
I mean, no more to say to that. I mean, you definitely don't like losing, especially in Tuscaloosa.
I think what Jonathan Allen says there is such an interesting perspective, and Ryan Fowler does a great podcast covering Alabama for SEC Country, and I think it speaks to the way that players think of college football. Yeah. The era that matters, the era they're in. You know, the history with Auburn and the Iron Bowl or the third Saturday in October, that's not as big a deal to them as what they experience, and Allen experienced some losses at Ole Miss. So that leads me to a question. Last week, we saw Alabama definitely feel like it had extra motivation going into the game against Vanderbilt because of the trash talk before the game. Because Ole Miss in recent years has beaten Alabama, does that give extra motivation again for the Crimson Tide this Saturday?
Yeah, I think it actually will. And my answer to that is kind of wavered because, I think that, Nick Saban preaches it. Approach each game like it's its own, season. You go in and you do the things that week that are going to get you the attention. But listen, we had players-only meetings every week when I was a player. And one of the things I always preached when I became a leader, when I became a captain in 2009 was, hey, I was there in 2007 when we lost to Louisiana Monroe. I was there in 2007 when we lost to Mississippi State. I've seen these things happen. And if you think it won't happen to you, it will happen to you. And so I think that's an extra motivation. These guys that have been around this team for a while and have seen some of these losses to these younger kids. We saw the freshmen play for Alabama against Vanderbilt last week. Some of these people stepping into big rotational roles. A freshman, for some reason, when you're 18, 19, you tend to have an ability to show up to Alabama and think you're just going to win some of these games because Nick Saban's your coach, because you wear a crimson jersey. That's not going to be the case. You still have to go out and put the work in to win these games, and I think it gives these older people within this program an ability to say, look, I was around here. I saw Ole Miss beat us 2 years in a row. If you think Shea Patterson and this wide receiver core is going to come in here and not trying to win this game, you're gravely mistaken, and I think it just gives them a platform to speak from.
We're hearing from a lot of Alabama fans in the comment section. Michael Scott Rogers says, roll tide, roll. Isaac Berry saying, roll tide, roll. Tila Welch-Kelly also saying, roll tide. A lot of the Alabama fans are obviously, with good reason, excited about where their team is after the blowout win against Vanderbilt last week. On the other side of things, though, if you're an Ole Miss fan, the thought that an Alabama ex-player or Alabama players might be talking about, hey, this is the Ole Miss team that beat us in 2014. They beat us in 2015. Don't forget that when you go out and play this Saturday. If you're Ole Miss, you're like, can we not sneak up into this game? Can we not tiptoe our way into this game on Saturday? Does this have to be kind of put out there on, in the memory banks of exactly what happened? Because Ole Miss is already nearly a 30-point underdog here. The last thing they need is Alabama trying to right some wrong of something that happened 2 or 3 years ago. If you're an Ole Miss fan or you're even an Ole Miss player or coach, you're like, is this really the storyline that needs to be established for this game? This is not the same Ole Miss team.
No, see, I disagree with you. I think, and I would love to hear from the Ole Miss fans in the comment section. I feel like this is kind of worn as a badge of honor, as a badge of pride. This is not your rival. And the fact that some things your teams did a couple of years ago still stick in Jonathan Allen's mind and make your team is now looked at as one of the biggest rivals and one of Alabama's greatest players' memory, I think that's a little bit of a badge of honor. Ole Miss has not had the season that it wanted coming in. They lost their head coach. There's been a lot of questions asked. There have been trials. There's been legislation happening. For them to be able to wear that as a badge of honor into Tuscaloosa this weekend and say, you know what, we beat y'all 2 of the last 3. I think Ole Miss fans love that.
Yeah, I think on that particular point, I think you're right. I don't think they like the idea of Alabama giving a dose to them like they gave to Vanderbilt a week ago. I don't think they like that. But to your point about being prideful about having won in 2014 and 2015, I love the way you said it, 2 of the last 3. That's staggering to think that Ole Miss has had that kind of success against Alabama. And really, to a certain extent, I'm not saying it justifies the sort of extracurricular stuff that went on at Ole Miss, but no matter what the NCAA does from this point going forward, you can't take that away from Ole Miss. They've got bragging rights against Alabama that nobody else could have.
Yeah, those aren't vacated wins. This is not something like recruiting violations where you go back and vacate these wins, although, at some point they might have to do that. But these games were won, and they were won in epic fashion by Ole Miss. And Ole Miss has been able to do something that not a lot of teams have done, beat Alabama in back-to-back years. That never happens against Alabama. You see some of the fluky wins, not fluky wins, they're earned wins, but Johnny Manziel beats Alabama or Nick Marshall beats Alabama. And these teams are like, you know what, we beat Alabama this year. Not many teams have done it in back-to-back years. And I, for one, think Ole Miss probably wears that as a badge of pride. Hey, this is not one of our rivals. This is not Mississippi State, but we're still in the back of their minds.
Speaking of badges of pride, one thing that Alabama fans may wear as a Dr. Jay Jacobs, this should be one scandal too many. The time for regime change in the athletics department, starting with the man at the top of the organizational chart, is long overdue. You can obviously kind of rope the softball issue that just popped up into this. Other things in recent years, I guess, are going to come to mind here. You know Alabama, the state, better than I do. You probably understand the Auburn program better than I do. Is it time for Jay Jacobs to go? And is this basketball deal that we talked a little bit about yesterday, is this the last straw?
Yeah, I tend to think it is, and that's not just the Bama guy coming out of me. I think a lot of Auburn fans will probably agree with that too. When you look back, and it's not just the scandal side. There have been some scandals. There's been some questions going all the way back to Cam Newton's time, but there's also been some of the hires. I mean, Gene Chizik won a national championship, but then he's out in 3 years. You look at Tony Barbie, coaching the basketball team, Sonny Galloway, the baseball coach, obviously the softball coach, like you just brought up, Clint Myers. I mean, those are names that Jay Jacobs brought in, and it seems like every one of those guys seemed to blow up in his face. And there's just too many things pointing in that direction. And again, I'd love to hear from the Auburn fans on this topic. The ones I've talked to do think it's time for Jay Jacobs to go. There's just been too many questions asked about some of the decisions he's made, and I think he's overrun his tenure there.
In the comment section, Isaac Berry saying that he agrees with what Skarbinski wrote there. Tyler Hayes says, I agree too. As an Auburn alum, it's time to clean house. And I think if you're an alumnus of Auburn, I don't think that you take a statement like that lightly, because here's the thing. If Auburn is truly going to try to move on and turn a new page with a different athletic administration, if you're an Auburn football fan, what you may find is that administration has a lot less tolerance for kind of aggressive tactics, big spending, aggressive recruiting tactics, the kind of things that keep you competitive in the SEC. If there's enough stuff going on with this basketball program, all of a sudden Auburn may not have the same freedom to recruit in football the way that it's had in the past. Yeah. I would be concerned about that. Frankly, I really don't care who the athletic director is for any of these schools. I think for the most part, these businesses, and that's what these are, businesses, I think these businesses kind of run themselves. However, I do think that if this is bad enough that you have to fire the athletic director at Auburn, you're talking about a new era of Auburn athletics that might not be as kind to Auburn in terms of being able to do everything it can to make sure that it's winning at football.
Well, to me, I look at an athletic director kind of in terms of the way most people look at offensive linemen. It's only a bad thing if you begin to hear their name a bunch. If they start to mesh up a bunch and offensive linemen give up a bunch of sacks, then all of a sudden you start hearing his name, then all of a sudden it becomes a problem. And I think that's what Jay Jacobs is looking at. He made some hires. They won a national title on his watch. They've done some good things in the athletic department, but so far, some of the negatives are starting to mount up against him. And I think that's when you start to ask questions about these ADs. You only question the AD and when the bad things happen, and I think now is that time for a lot of Auburn fans.
Diedrich Frazier in the comment section, who's a Georgia fan, said, you should fire all these people at Auburn. And that's obviously an example of what you see a lot of when it comes to something like this. A lot of SEC fans having fun at the expense of Auburn. But let me tell you something. If a school like this goes down in a really big way, and I feel the same way about Ole Miss, I mean, that domino as it topples has a way of potentially toppling some other dominoes as well. So as much as Alabama fans and Georgia fans probably like the idea of Auburn taking it on the chin with this one, if this is a school really going down, much the same way Ole Miss could be going down with its NCAA investigation, don't expect that group to do anything other than try to drag somebody down with it.
No, I'm with you, and I think that's going to happen at Louisville. Obviously, they've already cleaned house up there. They fired the AD. They fired Rick Pitino. I think that they're going to start turning, and more names are going to start to come out of this. But I think the same thing might be happening at Auburn. By the way, this is not just an assistant coach. This isn't somebody that just walked in the Auburn program assistant. Person is a guy that played at Auburn.
Yeah,
he's
one of the great players of all time.
And so that leads me to believe that maybe he's been around this program for long enough to where he does know some of the boosters or people behind the scenes, and that led him in the direction that he's gone. And it's going to stink for a lot of people in a lot of different programs, not just Auburn, if these guys start to flip and all of a sudden that trail starts to run downhill and these guys are just the tip of the iceberg. I'm with you. You don't want to see too much of what's behind the scene in these situations.
That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor here of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's move on now. Item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we talked yesterday about what Clay Travis, the writer for Outkick the Coverage, had said about Florida, that Jim McElwain's the new Les Miles, suggesting that maybe Florida had been a little lucky to win some of the games that it has won. And you can kind of point to Jim McElwain, or I should say you can point to Clay Travis as that's a hot take artist. That's a guy that says things to get attention. That's what some people would say, and that may very well be true. But now a similar sentiment to what Clay Travis expressed on yesterday's show is being expressed also by Kirk Herbstreit, one of the most respected college football analysts of them all. Here's a snippet of a little Twitter exchange he had with someone about Florida, who said that Florida's lucky not to be 0-3. Don't be that guy complaining about the attention that Florida's gotten. Just be thankful that it's won some of those games. So Herbstreit there says, hey, Florida, if you think about it, lucky not to be 0-3 this season. Does that add some credence to this debate about whether or not Florida this season is actually lucky to be where it is and maybe fortunate not to have lost more games than it has?
Well, obviously, I tend to agree with Kirk. I think that they made some different decisions in different circumstances that brought them to this 2-1 mark. I think Jim McElwain did a good job in coaching in some of these late game situations. We had some people on here in the comment section asking questions about that. AJ Murphy asked, why did he pull Felipe Franks when he did? Do you not want to see that guy get in and get some snaps and kind of develop in this position? And my answer to that is I don't think Jim McElwain thought there was anything to lose at that point in the game. I think that he made the decision to go to Luke Del Rio because Felipe Franks, the moment looked too big for him, in my opinion. He looked like his feet were getting choppy. He was not accurate with his balls. He was making bad decisions. The offense was not kind of syncing up. And so what do you have to lose at that point? You're down by a couple of touchdowns. You put Luke Del Rio in. He's able to kind of light that flare and you come back. And I think that lends to what I'm saying about Jim McElwain is he has the ability and he has the platform to pull some of these decisions. Some of these other coaches don't. I'm not ready to say they're lucky because obviously they pulled some rabbits out of the hat to be in those situations to be able to come back. But they are in a way lucky to be sitting there at 2-1. How bad they looked at Michigan and how they should have lost the game to Kentucky and Tennessee.
A lot of folks weighing in on this subject in the comment section. John Rosado says 9-1 in close games. He's referencing McElwain's record. That's not luck at UF. Todd Bledsoe says a win is a win. They don't put lucky beside it in the record book. Cliff Nelson, LSU fan, says it's absolute luck. D. Pickett says Florida took the game. In other words, it wasn't given to them by Kentucky. And listen, for me, the issue is not what do you say about the games that Florida has won. You give them credit for those games and you look ahead to the rest of the season. But here's where luck kind of comes into play. If you were lucky to win the ones you did win, what does that mean for predictions about future games? And at a certain point in time, lucky wins have a way of turning into lucky losses, if that's indeed what this is. And that's not me saying that. It's Kirk Herbstreit saying that.
No, yeah, and Tim Brando also is in on that conversation as well. And the guy says, hey, keep picking against them. And I think the way he answered it is, hey, they're 0-3 against the spread. It's not like we're making bad picks here. I mean, Florida is not covering. Florida was a 3-point favorite against Kentucky. They win by 1.
Yeah.
They were more than that against Tennessee, and they ended up pulling that game off at the last second too. So it's not like that Florida is just blowing these teams away at the end and you keep picking against them. They are barely covering their butts, especially against the spread. And so I think that's what gives these guys the ability to talk about.
And that's an interesting point because Gary Lawn says about Kirk Herbstreit, he picked Kentucky, was embarrassed, but the truth is, as you said, if you put a bet down on Kentucky in this game, you went to the pay window for that.
Right, and you're not betting that the Kentucky is going to forget to cover 2 receivers. I mean, let's be honest here. It was an absolutely a good bet if you bet Kentucky in that, and he's still getting paid out.
Chase Toole has an interesting comment. He's a Florida fan. He says, I partially agree, but I'd also call it capitalizing on their mistakes rather than luck. Go Gators. And Chase, I did say that yesterday too. And for the Florida fans who think I don't give the Gators enough credit, I did say that Florida does not wilt in these games because it has played in big games. It's won the East twice under Jim McElwain. It's been in the SEC championship game, obviously, in those same 2 years. So the moment may be too big for Florida in the Swamp 2 weeks ago. The moment in Kentucky's own stadium, loud crowd, those chrome helmets, and whatever Kentucky was trying to do to kind of spice things up, maybe that moment got to be a little too big for them. I don't buy the close record, record in close games that evens out over time, but I do buy into the idea that right now Florida is a little more comfortable in some of these games than the opponents they're playing.
Right, and the way he said it is a little bit better way of saying what I wanted to say is that, you know what, you are what your record says you are. And the fact is that Florida's 2-1 right now, and they had to be in those games to be able to capitalize on those situations late in the game. And they weren't getting beat by 20 points. They weren't getting beat by 30 points like LSU did against Mississippi State. They were still in those games, and that gave them the ability to make some of those plays late. I still call it a prayer from Felipe Franks to Tyree Cleveland. I think I don't want to say I was lucky, but I do think it was a prayer. But that just is a microcosm to me. You're close enough to be able to get plays like that done, and Florida time and time again under McElwain has been able to pull those games out.
We'll get more of your comments in the comment section on this subject here today. Florida fans weighing in on this, and some Gator haters, I guess, weighing in a little bit as well. For now, though, before we talk to Alex Hickey in a couple of minutes about the situation at LSU, let's check in on item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And boy, Tennessee would appear to be pulling out all the stops, trying to create an advantage inside Neyland Stadium on Saturday for its game against Georgia. First of all, you have what the fans are doing. They've been asked to, you have whiteouts and blackouts. They've been asked to do something that has been done a few times at Neyland Stadium before, which is do the checkerboard deal where one section wears white, one section wears orange, and that makes for a nice look in the stadium, and maybe it makes the fans want to cheer a little louder. But that's not the only, what I'm going to call, gimmick being employed for Tennessee this Saturday. The Vols also breaking out. Well, let me show you what they're breaking out for Saturday. Take a look at this. That's right. Tennessee going back to the smoky gray uniform.
Did you just call this a gimmick? You really
it's
do
a gimmick.
Yeah, I guess it is a gimmick.
It's a gimmick. Now, like, that video is actually pretty cool. There's only one bad thing with the video, and listen, I was actually getting ready to give Tennessee credit for what I thought was a pretty cool video. But our producer, Michael, one of our producers, he did point out that during the video, I don't know if we can show this again or what, but if we watch the video again, there is a spot like a stain. There you go. It's like, this video is so cool, except for the close-up.
It's got to be sweat, right?
Is that like a catch? What's he sweating for? It's not even the game hasn't even started yet.
I would be sweating if I was.
You can't wash the jersey in time to do the close-up video. And listen, I mean, obviously a football team wants to be thought of as a team that gets its jerseys dirty. But if you're making the video, you don't have to put the camera for a close-up on the stain.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just wonder if there's a better word we can use other than gimmick.
Gimmick
just feels like such a slap in the face. It's a gimmicky thing. I'm so indifferent to this, I can't say it any other way, because I'm not sure if this works. Does this work for the players? Does this work for the fans? It's definitely not something I ever experienced at Alabama.
Right.
We're the same uniforms. I don't think we ever tried to do anything with the fans there, so it's not something I've ever been a part of.
What I think you're doing right now is I think you're being too hard on the word gimmick. It is a gimmick.
Maybe so.
This is a ploy, which is another word for gimmick. It is a way to try to make the Tennessee football team look like it's all together, one happy family, after supposedly they've been fighting with each other this week. And the fans, who, by the way, are more likely to come dressed as empty seats, more so than orange and white in one section or the other. I mean, even the Tennessee fans will say this. Not even every Tennessee fan is on board for doing the orange and white checkerboard deal because they're not happy with their coach.
I don't know. Gimmick just sounds like such a slap in the face, though. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is about the word gimmick. It feels like it's like cheap or something that's being forced on some of these people.
This is one of those things, and you should take this as a compliment. I think this is one of those elements in which people probably should copy Alabama. Alabama does not need smoky gray uniforms. They don't need black and white houndstooth uniforms to go out there and play well in a game. And the fact that Tennessee feels like it has to dial up the gray uniforms for Georgia is a gimmick. The Kentucky going with the silver helmets, the chrome helmets last week for a big game like that. That's a gimmick.
Well, and here was my initial observation about it. I probably wouldn't say that maybe it's a slap in the face if you call it a gimmick, if it was just one or the other. If you're wearing the smoky uniforms or you're checkerboarding Neyland Stadium, I'm like, I'm cool with that. That's something like Penn State does. They have old school uniforms, but they like to white out Happy Valley. They like to pull the fans into it and make it a rowdy atmosphere at night. But both of them together, to me, it does seem a little gimmicky, and I guess that's why I look at it as maybe a slap in the face.
Well, my issue, and I'll get some comments on this in just a moment, It'd be one thing if Tennessee was riding high. The smoky gray uniforms are a
Right.
little cooler at that point in time. It'd be another thing if it's going to be 100-something thousand people in Neyland Stadium. Checkerboarding in the stands, that looks pretty good at that point. But the way that it stands right now, it's not going to be a full stadium. Vols fans are not excited about their team. And we've got all kinds of rumors. These players are fighting with each other. The gray uniforms only, I think, accentuate what's going wrong with Tennessee at the moment.
Yeah, see, I think Daniel Beard said it perfectly. Another word for this is redirection. This is exactly what this is. Hey, we've had all these questions about Shy Tuttle. We've had all these questions about our offensive play calling. We had a debacle down there against Florida. Let's redirect. Let's point in the middle of the week. Let's talk about smoky gray uniforms and checkerboard. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Really, the smoky gray uniform is almost like a symbol of the dark cloud that hangs over the Tennessee program right now.
Publicity stunt is another word I'm seeing on here. That's probably a pretty good one too. I just feel like gimmick is such like a cheap slap in the face. It's an opportunity to get people in the door, I guess is what
Michael Collum in the comment section says no gimmicks are going to be able to stop the dogs on Saturday. So we'll keep taking your comments on that. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And now let's check in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Speaking of gimmicks, now this is not so much a gimmick. We'll talk about the LSU alternate jerseys a little later on in the show. Let me talk about Alex Hickey right now, though, about a more important point than that, and that's what's going on with the LSU quarterback situation. Alex, I think one of the maybe underreported stories of the weekend were how upset some LSU fans and, frankly, some of the observers of the LSU program for Ed Orgeron taking Danny Etling out of a game that he was playing well in, putting the freshman quarterback Miles Brennan in, only to have to take him back out again after that. As a guy who's there, covered that with a really compelling column about the same subject, exactly what was the problem that so many Tigers fans had with that issue?
Well, surprisingly, I have found the reaction to be exactly the opposite. My point when I wrote the column was it's a little bit strange communication-wise. Not that, obviously you want to give the young freshmen some reps in a real game, but I just thought it was weird that nobody told Danny Etling that this was going to happen. And I think that's a bad level of communication to have with your starting quarterback. But, when I wrote it, actually most LSU fans who contacted me said, well, who cares? We got to see Miles Brennan. So the fan base, I think, sees it differently than me and some other observers did, just as far as the optics go, because they're that excited about Miles Brennan.
So that's actually kind of an interesting point. So it sounds like you're saying that some LSU fans, if they look ahead to games in October, November, they feel like their best chance of winning those games is with an experienced Miles Brennan, more so than last year's starter Danny Etling. Is that the situation here?
That seems to be the fan base's point of view, but I don't believe it's the coaching staff's point of view. Danny Etling's just still really far ahead of Miles Brennan as far as development. Miles certainly has a stronger arm, but I think in every other element of the game, Etling is just a little bit more nuanced. I'd say release and arm strength are the two things that Brennan can bring that are a little bit different than Etling. But just as far as being able to go deep in the playbook, right now Etling's certainly gives him a better shot, but the fan base, as often happens, especially here with the quarterback history, it's always about the intrigue of seeing the number 2 guy.
So, Alex, we'll make this the last thing for you. On our show, we talk a lot about the reactions to the big wins, the big losses, and as you know, so many times those reactions kind of turn into overreactions. In the case of LSU, it did have a bad loss to Mississippi State, but this is still a talented team. Is it too much to say that the Mississippi State loss signifies that LSU can't be a contender this season in the SEC West, or do you think that LSU, now that it has a loss, might be one of those teams that kind of lurks under the radar here a little bit?
Well, as you guys know, this whole league, especially in the West, is just, it doesn't feel the same that it did in years past. Actually, after the Mississippi State game, I was probably more optimistic than most people about the Tigers, because I was like, well, that's got to be the second best team in the West, and they've got a real chance against everybody else they play other than Alabama. And then after the Georgia game, I was like, I'm not so sure. So I think there's a lot of question marks that we won't really start getting answers to until they play Florida in 2 weeks.
Well, Alex, we'll look forward to seeing how that storyline develops between now and then, and what the Tigers do at quarterback, and we'll read a lot more from you at SECCountry.com, and look forward to talking to you again here on AT&T SEC Country Live again very soon. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, right now LSU is a team that I don't quite have a full handle on. I think I probably do agree with LSU fans who like Miles Brennan at quarterback more so than Danny Etling. And you're talking about LSU, beating an Auburn later in the season, beating an Alabama later in the season, even playing close in some of those games. I think Brennan's the guy that gives you the best chance of doing that.
Yeah, to me, when I saw them play against Mississippi State, and the same kind of was true against Syracuse, is what their calling card has been the last few years is suffocating defense under Dave Aranda and a team that can run the football when it needs to, just cannot seem to pass the ball here in recent years. They were the opposite of that against Mississippi State. They couldn't run the ball really when they needed to. They had some plays that looked better than others, but the defense was non-existent, and I'm still not sure what they were trying to do defensively to stop Mississippi State. I mean, some of the defenses they were employing just left them open to the Mississippi State tailbacks and Nick Fitzgerald being able to really open up on some of the linebackers. And I know that that was a lopsided loss. I just feel like the game planning more than anything was really bad that week.
By the way, to go back to the subject we were talking about before, Alex Hickey joined us about the alternate uniforms and the gimmicks. Greg Steele, a Florida fan, said, BA, that's me, loved the Kentucky chrome helmet until they got beat. Now, Greg, that's not entirely true. I said the silver helmets look cool, but I said last week Kentucky shouldn't be dialing up a gimmick for a game like that against Florida. They only have all the motivation they need because they haven't won in 3 decades.
No, yeah, I'm right there on board with you about that one. And BA, he liked the helmets, but I don't know if he was sure about the gimmick he played.
Yeah, I mean, I think the smoky gray uniforms for Tennessee aren't that bad looking, but, how about you bring him out at a different time than at a time when you might be fighting for your coach's job? It just seems like you're trying too hard.
No, that's kind of what I meant when I said the word gimmick just sounds like a slap in the face. It's almost like, you're really just trying, you're going above and beyond to try to get people in the seats doing this whole checkerboard thing.
Absolutely. All right, we'll get more of your comments coming up in our comment section here today. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live, AT&T Entertainment Your Way. Let's do item number 5 here. And really good stuff here from a former SEC star, Jadeveon Clowney. Was a star at South Carolina, now with the Houston Texans. And, well, a couple things about this video I'm about to show you I think are pretty interesting. First of all, apparently kids in Houston have no idea who Steve Spurrier is. But when Clowney educates these kids as to who Spurrier is, he goes on to do, well, you can decide for yourself how good of an impersonation this is of Clowney's college coach, Steve Spurrier. Take a look at this.
Can you do a Southern accent?
Well, you listen to one, right? I mean.
Well, you came from South Carolina, so I could guess that you probably know how to do it.
You ever heard Steve Spurrier?
No.
He's from my way. That's the guy. He was my coach back in college. And he used to do the funniest accent ever at practice. You want me to do it for you?
Yeah.
He come to practice. Hey, guys. Today is going to be a hard one, so it's hot out here. Very hot. It's not going to go long. Just 45 minutes today, and it's going to be a good one, quick one. Got to get to my golf tournament today, so I'm going to get out a little early.
All right, several things about that video. First of all, how these kids never heard of Steve Spurrier? I mean, I guess they're young, and he hasn't been a great coach in a while. That's interesting. I don't know how good the Spurrier impersonation is, but the fact that he can get his voice that low at the beginning and that high at the end, that at least shows a good bit of range. Third thing for me, not exactly the most compelling or flattering description of Spurrier, that if it's a hot practice, he doesn't want to be there, he'd rather be playing golf. That may bother some South Carolina fans a little bit.
Of course it would. That's the first thing that caught my attention about the whole video. I was like, aside from the content, aside from the fact that he's, doing the Steve Spurrier voice, the fact that he's like, hey, we're going to do 45 minutes, we're going to get out of here, I got to go to the golf course. It's like, that's something that obviously happened. I mean, he didn't just make that up out of thin air. That's something a lot of South Carolina fans have looked to since Steve Spurrier left, and that's something that obviously was probably a bigger point than a lot of people realize.
Vicky Berry brings up an interesting point. She says it's odd to see a big guy in uniform with his legs crossed. So here's the part that you don't understand about that. The kid in the video, and these are like 2 kid reporters that the Houston Texans have. It's actually a really funny video. But the kid had his leg crossed, and so Clowney was trying to be like the kid in the video by trying to cross his leg, and he actually was having a little bit of a hard time doing that. That was actually part of the joke before he got there. So that's the explanation for why Clowney had his leg crossed. He was trying to have a little fun with the kid here. But if you're a South Carolina fan, all of a sudden there's a lot of explanation for why the Gamecocks weren't very good at the end of Spurrier. He wasn't leaving practice early to go recruit. That's for goodness sakes. He was going out there to play golf or get out of the sun or something like that.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, Steve Spurrier was not built for this day and age of recruiting, I don't think. I think he was very comfortable with the way recruiting regulations were back in the 2000s, where everybody kind of recruited and he can get his guys he wanted to at Florida. When everybody started amping that up, that's when he stepped away from the table here in the SEC and was like, you know what? I can't work these hours anymore. I'm going to head off to the golf course. And good for him. He's had a Hall of Fame career.
All right, really good stuff there. We'll have more of our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 coming up in a moment. For now, though, we started the show by looking back on an Alabama loss to Ole Miss a couple of years ago. The first time that Alabama lost to Ole Miss in this recent streak was in 2014. And 2014, a special year for SEC fans. In fact, it's the subject of today's Tony Chachere's Seasons to Remember. Take a look.
Tony Chachere's presents Seasons to Remember and a look back at 2014. For Alabama fans, a year to be remembered as the start of a streak of 3 consecutive SEC championships that continues to this day. However, 2014 wasn't all pleasant memories for the Crimson Tide. The lone regular season blemish was a trip to Ole Miss on a day that started with one of the most talked about episodes of ESPN's College Game Day ever, including an appearance by pop star Katy Perry that immediately went viral. Ole Miss hopes this Saturday's game against Alabama is just as exciting. For Georgia, 2014 is thought of as a season of what might have been. It began with Todd Gurley electrifying UGA fans with highlight reel performances, but ended with a controversial suspension and a knee injury. The Bulldogs' SEC title hopes soon ended too. But those championship dreams for Georgia continue today, just like all the other SEC teams that would like to stop Alabama's streak of dominance, a streak that started in 2014. A season to remember.
And Tony Chachere's Seasons to Remember here on AT&T's SEC Country Live is brought to you by Tony Chachere's. And if you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, make sure you check out Tony Chachere's, tailgating champion since 1972. Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. And I guess I'm curious about your memories of that 2014 loss for Alabama against Ole Miss. Jeremy Pettis in the comments section said that it's a revenge opportunity there for Alabama. I mean, is that the way that you think these Alabama players truly are approaching this, as a chance to get revenge for that game in 2014?
I think there are some players that approach it that way. I think the elder statesmen look at it that way and say, this is a chance to get back some of these wins. I don't want to, end my career being, 500 against Ole Miss or below 500 against Ole Miss, but I remember both of those losses that Alabama took to Ole Miss as being something that just the ball bounced Ole Miss's way. I mean, it really did. They made the plays. Like I said this on the show a million times. Bama most of the time is not going to beat themselves. You have to go out and beat them. Ole Miss those couple of years, they went out and beat them. The ball bounced their way a couple of times, but they went out and beat Alabama with their teams.
All right, speaking of Alabama, they have the subject out of number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list here. And, we got a lot of fun last week with Nafe Leal, the defensive lineman for Vanderbilt, who probably gave Alabama a little more motivation for last week than he probably wanted to. You've seen this video 1,000 times now, but for those of you who may just now be getting initiated in this conversation, here's what this Vanderbilt defensive lineman said that had Alabama licking its chops to go out and play the Commodores last week. Take a look.
Before you go, what kind of win is this for the program?
We expected to get this. When you come to our house, we show you how to play some SEC ball. It don't matter where you're from. You're going to know what ball we play. We're going to next week ranked, that's fine.
So that was Nafe Leal saying that about Alabama. And, credit to Cole Kubelik here, who watches game film and takes a good look at the offensive lineman, because he spotted an Alabama offensive lineman looking to be what's absolutely getting a measure of revenge against this Vanderbilt defensive lineman. Mike, you played the position. You can tell us. Is that what we're seeing here, courtesy of Cole Kubelik on Twitter? That's Leal, who just absolutely gets pancaked to the ground there. Now, is this just a coincidence, or did Alabama target this guy late in the game to be knocked on his back?
This is an absolute coincidence. Let me tell you why. Those two guys in that picture, I think it's 56 and 63, that's J.C. Hassenauer and that's Brandon Kennedy. Those are backup linemen from Alabama. I think actually Hassenauer might even be a third-string lineman from Alabama. So this is not something they put, they were like, these starting linemen are like, hey, we're going to get this guy. These are backups in just trying to get their licks. I'm going to give the guy a B here because he did flatten him, but I think his linebacker made the play on this run. I think he tackles Najee Harris in the backfield.
Is that right?
Yeah.
See, once again, this is just like yesterday.
Yeah, he's flowing over the top.
Why do you ruin this stuff?
It's been ruined for me. That's why. I can't watch it like normally. Look at him. See his linebacker flow over the top, skates over.
There's nothing cooler than watching, two big SEC behemoths and man on man, and one guy gets knocked to the ground. You got to tell me, so-and-so actually made the play. It's like, can we not just enjoy this?
I give it a B. I didn't give it a C. I give it a B. I think it deserves a B.
I actually sort of disagree with your premise, even though you would know far better than me because you actually played the position, or at least the offensive line. But I disagree with your premise that the fact that it's backups doing this proves that it wasn't intentional. Listen, the starters got a job to do. They're trying to win the game. They're trying to build up the big league. It's the backups who come in and have a chance on one play to kind of get some credit from their teammates, get that maybe pat on the back in the locker room, get some special attention from Coach Saban. You know, we all understand what that's like. Even if you didn't play at the highest level of college football, you want to make a name for yourself as a backup. You earn a lot of street cred with your teammates if you come in the game and knock LaFeo down.
My point is that the backup linemen are trying to do this no matter who it is. They want to make a name for themselves no matter who it is. It didn't matter if this guy talking trash. It was like, hey, I'm going to go in and make the name for myself. I'm going to smash somebody in the ribs, and maybe Coach Saban will take notice and I can start to get more reps down the field. I don't think the name on the back of the jersey or the comments he made last week had anything to do with it.
Let me tell you who's making some sense on this subject as opposed to you. It's James Crump, who says he was targeted. Even the second string knew who he was. On that point alone, did they know where he was on the field? Is that the kind of thing that, like, hey, it's number so-and-so, and they were aware of him at all times? Is that the kind of thing? And I'm actually being serious in this. And if it's not, if you don't think that was the case, then I'll take your word for it. Do you think they knew where LaFeo was during the game?
I do. I think the offensive line do. I think they probably, they're sitting there on Tuesday. They're watching film as an offensive line unit. Maybe the coach, is out that night. Maybe it's just the group getting together. Somebody puts a laser pointer up there on the screen and goes, man, this guy right here, this is the one that's been talking. He's the one that's going to show us how to play in the SEC. So maybe there is some of that where those guys get in, they go, you know what, this is that guy that's been talking. But to me, still to fall back on, I don't think you give it any extra effort. I think they're doing that no matter who's sitting there at the nose guard position.
Love Michael Horning's comment in the comment section. He said, Mike, talking about to you, he says, maybe he just tripped. Going back to what you said yesterday about the Rashaan Evans play. You ruined that for us as well.
He was caught off balance, man. What can I say? No. That was a good block. That was a good pancake.
All right, we'll look ahead to the Auburn-Mississippi State game in just a couple of minutes with Brandon Walker, who works here for SEC Country with us. We'll do that coming up. For now, though, let's do item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We talked about the Georgia-Tennessee game earlier from the Tennessee perspective and the chance they may be playing for Butch Jones' job. Do Tennessee players still want to play for him with each other? I think that's all up for debate when you hear some of the rumors coming out of Knoxville. But Georgia's got its own storylines to think about here a little bit too, including how it maintains its edge after a dominant win against Mississippi State last Saturday. Well, Kirby Smart was asked about that yesterday. On Tuesday, he was asked, hey, do you have to try to talk your team up to kind of keep them focused after getting such a big win where they're going to get so much praise from the media? And Kirby Smart gave, I thought, a pretty interesting answer to that. Here's Kirby Smart from Tuesday with the media.
We worked hard on it on Monday. We had conversations about it. We didn't do a whole lot today. I mean, today is a Tuesday. It's a work day. You can't rah-rah them every day. I mean, they got to take ownership in it, and the leadership has done a good job of that. I was worried today wouldn't be a great day. I thought it would be a little kind of lackluster, but it wasn't that way. They got out there and worked and competed, and hope it's the same way tomorrow.
In the comment section, Brandon Michael Esco says UJ is always let down because they're always overhyped. They'll be brought back to reality just like every other year. What Brandon's saying there in the comment section is something that a lot of fans have said about Georgia, and that's why I think the question is relevant to Kirby Smart. Hey, are you worried about your team maintaining its edge after getting a big win? But I take it interesting to say that Kirby Smart acknowledges that's a thing you have to think about. They talked about it on Monday, and Kirby Smart, who does not throw a lot of compliments around regularly, said, I thought we practiced pretty well today. I think if you're a college football observer or a Georgia or a Tennessee fan wondering about this Saturday and the chance of a Georgia letdown, to me it seems less likely to occur if Kirby Smart's complimenting his team's practice habits going into the game. Do you agree?
I'd absolutely agree with that. And you tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like this is a game that under the previous regime, when Mark Richt was there, you were probably a lot more worried about this being a letdown game. And it's not that Mark Richt coached up to his opponents or down to his opponents, but I don't know if he had the consistency as a head coach that Georgia fans wanted. I think Kirby Smart knows that. I think this is a conscious effort on his part that he knows that his team, if they're going to get to where he wants them to be, if they're going to get to the top of the SEC East and land in Atlanta and make a lot of noise in the college football playoff, they've got to learn to play with consistency. And he mentions the leadership right there. I think that's a big part. They've got to learn in these games to continue to play not to Tennessee or not to Mississippi State. They've got to play to the level that Georgia is going to establish. They've got to play against themselves week in and week out, play to the level they know they're capable of. And I think that Kirby Smart understands not only is that a big part for this year, it's a big part for the future of this program. They can establish that leadership and get that done. I'm going to be paying close attention to that this Saturday. Can Georgia go in with a business-like attitude and deal with a Tennessee team that should not be in this game at the end?
Kirby Smart establishing a different kind of culture that makes those kinds of things less likely? Well, that answer to me is kind of complicated because on the one hand, I don't think having a hard time maintaining the same edge for multiple weeks, I don't think that's a problem that's sort of exclusive to Georgia. I think that's true around college football as well. one of my reasons for thinking Tennessee could be closer with Georgia on Saturday is not because of Georgia's past, just because it's hard to go on the road after everybody at home was patting you in the back and everybody was cheering for you. That's just a hard thing to do for any college football team. That's not unique to Georgia, but Kirby Smart may be the kind of unique head coach that is, as someone else in the comment section said, molded after Nick Saban and a little less likely to see these things, kind of befall his team because he just sort of trains against it.
Yeah, Kirby Smart is not dumb enough to think that, people will still remember the Mississippi State win if they go to lose against Tennessee. He knows, he understands that this is a weekly thing. I mentioned it to you today on your Dog Nation podcast. This is still September. I mean, it's September 27th right now. We haven't even turned the calendar October yet, and so I think these wins look so big because they're happening right now, but Kirby Smart knows if his team does not go in with a business-like attitude, Tennessee has the ability and they have the weapons to make a lot of noise against them this weekend. So they have to go in there with that championship attitude that, hey, we're going to play to our level, not to their level.
James Crump kind of agreeing with you. He said, under Rick, this would be the perfect letdown game. Under Smart, no way. Georgia's not going to overlook Tennessee. You also talked about turning the calendar. Haven't done that yet, but we will turn the page right now here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. We're brought to you by AT&T. They're a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And turning the page means checking in with Brandon Walker, who knows the Mississippi State Bulldogs because he does our Mississippi State podcast each and every day on SECCountry.com on the Mississippi State page. Brandon, welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. How you doing today?
Doing very well, Brandon. I appreciate you having me here. Always good to talk.
Well, we're glad to have you here on the program as well. We were just talking a moment ago about that Georgia win against Mississippi State, but from the Bulldogs' perspective, the Maroon Bulldogs, I guess I mean here, heading into a game with Auburn on Saturday, probably important to look back and try to figure out what exactly happened there for Mississippi State against Georgia. Why did that game get out of hand so quickly?
That's the million-dollar question. Mississippi State was hyped up, number 17 in the country. People are talking about Dan Mullen as the second-best coach in the SEC, talking about Mississippi State possibly being the second-best team in the SEC, and then they go lay a gigantic egg. First play from scrimmage for Mississippi State loses 6 yards. First play for Georgia goes for 59 yards and a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's a blowout. So that was a very disappointing effort for Mississippi State. That's why I think this Saturday against Auburn is not really about State or not really about Auburn. It's about Mississippi State and making sure they come out a lot better than they came out in Athens.
So along those lines, when you look ahead at the Mississippi State-Auburn game on Saturday, what I think is a really compelling game, is it your expectation as a guy who knows the Mississippi State program so well that the Bulldogs will bounce back and play much closer and better with Auburn on Saturday? Is this a game that Mississippi State could win?
Well, here's the thing. You can bounce back, play a lot better, and still lose. I mean, Auburn's really good, and there's a lot of room for Mississippi State to improve and still maybe not win the game. Is this a game that Mississippi State can win? Absolutely. Is this a game that Mississippi State is going to win? I don't think so. I think Auburn's a better football team than Georgia. I think they are the second best team in the SEC. Those are the number 2 and 3 teams, and Georgia handled Mississippi State so easily that I'm not sure Mississippi State can go into Auburn and win. But as long as they come out and actually make a better accounting of themselves, I think State fans would take 3-2 at this point.
So it sounds like you think what Auburn did last week in crushing Missouri is an example of an Auburn team kind of turning the corner here. Now, we'll forgive them somewhat for losing at the national champions. No apologies necessary for a road loss at Clemson. But the Mercer game was too close. The Georgia Southern game was kind of uninspiring, unimpressive. It sounds like you think the Missouri win for Auburn last week may have turned the corner.
It's less about the Missouri win for Auburn and more about what Georgia looked like when they played Mississippi State, because Georgia set the template for beating Mississippi State. Georgia has a very good defense and elite front seven. Well, guess what? Auburn does too. Auburn has a really good defensive line, really good front seven, and Auburn can replicate what Georgia did to Mississippi State, and Mississippi State didn't score a touchdown against Georgia. So it's less about what Auburn looked like against Missouri and more about the fact that Auburn looks a lot like the Georgia defense that already shut Mississippi State down.
Well, Brandon, it's always great to have you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We love the work you're doing there on the Mississippi State podcast. More Cowbell, it's called, on the Mississippi State page there at SECCountry.com. We'll look forward to speaking to you on our program again very soon.
Yeah, and Mike, I appreciate you talking to me. You didn't say a word. Thanks, guys.
BA doesn't let me say much during these interviews, man. I'll get to you next time. We'll have you back on.
We're trying to run a tight ship around here, Brandon.
It's not tight enough. Thanks, guys.
That's Brandon Walker there. And how about Brandon coming on the show and dropping a bomb, and now everybody's talking about this. Chuck Black, Greg Steele, Nakia Hester, everybody talking about the fact that he just said that he thought that Auburn was better than Georgia, and then Auburn was the second best team in the SEC right now. Now, you know that I'm high on Auburn, but I don't think it's fair at all through 4 weeks of the season to say that Auburn's been better than Georgia. I think Auburn can win the SEC West. I think the Tigers will win the SEC West, but not fair to put Auburn ahead of Georgia through 4 weeks.
Well, and since the offseason started, I've been obviously putting Georgia ahead of where I think Auburn's going to be. I think that it's going to be a close game once they finally do match up. These teams are closer than you realize they are right now. I think a lot of people discount, because of the 11-sack game against Clemson, like you brought up, a lot of people discount what Auburn is. They're still a dangerous football team with a dangerous offense that has 2 good running backs, a good quarterback, and a slew of wide receivers. I think that Auburn could beat anybody on any given day. I think it's going to be a matchup nightmare when they play against Georgia later in the year.
Ross Burden says Florida's better than Georgia. So all of a sudden now we got a lot of people coming in, kind of weighing in on who's better than who right now. And I told you this yesterday. I thought that the Missouri game, not so much an example of, okay, Auburn's finally good again, but it's proof that for the people who wrote them off, that it was premature, that Auburn's going to be fine. By the time these two teams actually play, Georgia and Auburn, November, I think Auburn's fine by the time that game takes place, and we'll have to see on the field who's better between the two of them. But if you want to look at bodies of work so far, you've got to give Georgia credit for what it's done. You can't give Auburn that much credit for a close loss. You've got to give credit for the wins that have taken place.
Yeah, you got to give them the credit for the body of work. And here's what's interesting about this entire dynamic. Georgia and Alabama both will get Auburn at the end of the season. They will get Auburn once Auburn has found out who they are. Auburn seemingly found their footing, like you said, against Missouri last week. Looked more like the Auburn team we've grown accustomed to, and now they're starting to get healthy in that backfield. Kerryon Johnson, I think, had 5 touchdowns last weekend. That's what Auburn is. Auburn is a team that should be running the ball a ton and answering with Jarrett Stidham when they need to. It seemed like they started to find their stride last week. Bama and Georgia are both going to get this team at the end of the year when they're playing probably at their best.
Jennifer Jones says Bama's better than them all. In some respects, I guess it does kind of come back to that sometimes here in AT&T SEC Country Live. Florida came up a moment ago as well. Let's make them the subject of item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And we didn't really talk about this as a topic this week. We kind of talked around it somewhat. We haven't really addressed it head on as a topic. The fact that Luke Del Rio going to be the starting quarterback for Florida on Saturday against Vanderbilt. Here's an example of Florida coach Jim McElwain making that announcement to the media on Monday.
So, moving forward to this week, Luke will take the starting reps in practice, and yet the other 2 guys will still get their reps as well. We'll see where it goes kind of from there. So that should answer your quarterback question.
So that was McElwain kind of dropping that in the beginning of his press conference. And here's the thing I'd be curious about. And, I joked with the Florida fans yesterday. Whichever quarterback they have in the game, that's the guy they all think is great. It was Del Rio last year. It was Malik Zaire in the summer. It was Felipe Franks 2 weeks ago. And now I guess it's back to Del Rio. He's the great one. Florida fans seem to think they have a great quarterback. They just keep changing their mind about which guy it is.
Now, see, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. I feel like Florida fans are going to pick out which one they think is the most serviceable. But from all the Florida fans I heard of, especially the ones in the comment section, the questions have been asked about Jim McElwain. When is he going to make our quarterback situation better? So I don't know if they feel like they have any great ones. I feel like the arguments are just over who gives us the best shot to win this weekend.
And I guess that's the point I want to bring up here. And I'm actually being serious about this. Transitioning back to something that Alex Hickey, the LSU writer who was with us earlier in the show, brought up about LSU fans. They like Miles Brennan, the freshman, better than Danny Etling, the incumbent starter, because they think that Brennan just got the higher upside. Well, at Florida, it would seem the same thing is potentially true for the Gators as well. That Felipe Franks, whether he's good enough to be the starter right now or not, does have the higher upside than Luke Del Rio. Do you think that, in all seriousness, do you think that Franks is the people's choice, or do you think that Florida fans are glad that Del Rio is the guy here?
I think that Florida fans understand that Felipe Franks is probably the future. He does have the higher upside. Unless Matt Corral comes in next year and wins over everybody and pulls a Jake Fromm and becomes the quarterback of the future, I think that everybody points to Felipe Franks from here on out as being the quarterback of the future. But I think what you saw last week in the fourth quarter, Luke Del Rio didn't come in, he didn't blow the doors off Kentucky. They left, one of the wide receivers wide open for him to hit a touchdown pass, but they looked more in sync. They looked more like the offense you thought Florida would have going into the year. For some reason, all of a sudden, the running blocking got better. I mean, his sense of urgency in the backfield and the leadership that he brought into the huddle, for some reason or another, made this Florida offense a better team. And I think most Florida fans were able to look at that game and see, okay, maybe this guy doesn't have a high ceiling, but for some reason his leadership makes us a better team right now.
Josh Conkle in the comment section says, Del Rio's a better manager, but not a better passer. He needs to teach Franks how to manage that offense. Here's the thing, and obviously I've never played the quarterback position, but I almost think being able to manage the offense and manage the game, understand the game plan, to me that's just as much of a rare skill as actually being able to throw the football is. There are a lot of people, apart from the athleticism, they just don't have the ability to kind of comprehend the offense and actually see it on the field when everything's moving so fast. So if Frank's got the better arm, if Del Rio understands the game better, I'm not sure you can kind of combine those two skills in the same quarterback necessarily.
Well, and here's the thing, and we've talked about this a ton of times. There are just certain programs where you need a guy like Felipe Franks that's a better passer. That guy is going to get the starting nod at a lot of programs. You're probably looking at Ole Miss, Missouri, probably South Carolina. Those guys are going to put the better passer in the game because they're passing teams. When you look at the way that Alabama attacks the game, when you look at the way Florida is trying to under Jim McElwain, you look at the way Kirby attacks the game, you don't need the better passer in the game. You need the better game manager. And I think that's what Florida fans are starting to understand is, hey, Felipe Franks might have this arm. He might can throw it 70 yards, but if he's not making the right reads and not throwing the right routes and keeping us away from trouble, then he's not the guy that needs to be in. That's how Florida has been molded, with a suffocating defense, just like Georgia and Alabama have.
Daniel Ray says another Bama quarterback that wouldn't wait his turn. Yes, at one point in time, Del Rio was there at Alabama. Cliff Nelson says, please start Del Rio against LSU. He's an LSU fan. We'll have 14 points scored by our defense in the first half. So that's an LSU fan, somewhat confident in what would happen if Del Rio was there. Chase Toole also says Del Rio has 9 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Sure, he knows the offense better, but he's too mistake prone. Franks is the future, but hasn't developed enough as of yet. Go Gators. So Chase, here's what I'll say. I don't believe that Felipe Franks is the future for Florida. I believe the future for Florida is Matt Corral, the 2018 commitment. Now, I know there was some scuttlebutt earlier this week because Corral took Florida commit out of his Twitter bio. I'm going to assume for right now that Corral is still a Florida commit. And if he does indeed enroll in the class of 2018, I think he starts next year as a true freshman. I think that Felipe Franks is an afterthought there at that point in time. So in terms of what you do between these two quarterbacks, given the fact that for now Florida has Corral coming in, you don't have the obligation to groom Franks because he's probably not the long-term starter.
Well, and that's just, to me, that's backup quarterback speak. You know how much I hate that. Everybody was saying that about Felipe Franks a couple of years ago. This guy's going to be the savior. This guy's going to be finally the guy that we get on campus at Florida that's going to be the quarterback of the future. Until Matt Corral takes that first snap of the season next year, I'm not going to believe it.
In fairness, though, Corral is a better prospect on paper than Franks was then. Yes, Franks was a U.S. Army All-American, but folks, I mean, that watched that game will say he didn't play that great during the game. So, Corral is a 5-star. Franks was a 4-star. There is a designation difference between Corral as a prospect and Franks.
I will give you that, but I think any coach, especially the ones in the SEC, will tell you the words on paper will always get you in bad situation. And that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to the quarterback position. The backup guy is always going to be the favorite, especially seemingly around the SEC, especially when they haven't even arrived on campus yet.
By the way, we're just showing a video of Matt Corral throwing it 77 yards from back in the opening. Now, to Frank's credit, he probably threw it about that far with the touchdown he threw to Tyree Cleveland the other day in the Tennessee game, an actual game. So I think what you're saying is I'm going to give credit for Franks for throwing that long in an actual game as opposed to Corral throwing in the opening. But Corral's a pretty good prospect.
No, I have no doubts that Matt Corral has all the ability and all the middle aspects to get into Florida and make a lot of noise in the quarterback situation. But my nature of here saying this is Felipe Franks was trusted to start against Michigan. He was trusted to start the first few games of the season for Florida. So I'm just not ready to say that because he's had some hiccups along the way that all of a sudden Matt Corral, an 18-year-old, is going to step into a spot.
Jeff Hefner says, look what Will Greer's doing at West Virginia. It was a bad coaching decision by Jim McElwain. I do kind of agree with that, and I'm sort of flying blind on this subject because I don't know why these two entities decided to part ways, Greer and Florida. But Florida would be in so much better shape right now if they just let Greer serve out of suspension and stick around Gainesville. They would have just been better off.
No, I agree with you. I don't know that it was a Jim McElwain coaching decision. I'm not that educated on that topic from when Will Greer left. I felt like it was kind of a mutual parting, and he was like, you know what, if you guys aren't going to get my back, then I'm going to head out of town. But it's worked out for Will Greer, and it hasn't worked out for Florida so far. He's doing some good things at West Virginia. So the question is going to continue to be asked as long as he's playing college football.
That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Do you have the patience for another alternate uniform conversation here?
I will try to get through the rest of the show. Just one more.
All right, one more. It's the subject of item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So LSU also wearing alternate jerseys this week as well. Not a motivational ploy. They're not playing a big game. I believe it's homecoming there in Baton Rouge. But they are going to rock the purple on Saturday. I think we have an example from LSU social media here of what the purple uniform is going to look like here. You get a little glimpse of that. You may have seen these on the field from LSU before in the past. Do you think they should wear these more? Because I do. I think LSU in the purple is actually a pretty hot look.
I don't know. See, I tend to like the LSU uniforms. I like the white LSU jerseys, the thing that looks really good. I think this is going to look fine. I think it's a good look. I do like the fact that it's coming out against Troy. I think that we'll start to use that word gimmick if it had come out against an Alabama team or somebody else that they're playing later on in the year. But I think it's a good look. I like LSU's uniforms. I like the combinations, the old school helmet they have going on. So I don't want them to tinker with it too much.
We have a lot of LSU fans that watch our show every day, and I actually love to hear from you for a moment. Why does LSU wear the white uniforms in every single game? Because you say you like the white uniforms. You could still wear those half the time if you wore the purple at home. I just think that purple jersey with the gold pants and the gold helmet, that's a good look.
Yeah, our man Cliff's trying to educate us here. He says they always wear the purple jerseys on homecoming, which makes a lot of sense because seemingly we see them one time a year. I don't know if that's a true fact or not, but
yeah, I get that. I get the idea of why you would want to wear them on homecoming, but why wouldn't you want to wear them more? I'm not saying that's a motivational ploy. I don't want you to do that for Alabama the same way I don't want Tennessee wearing gray uniforms for Georgia. But wearing them a little more frequently than just once a year, to me, that's a good-looking uniform. That's more than a once-a-year thing.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think it is a good-looking kit to be, to borrow a term from soccer, to put that together, the purple on the white.
Wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
Is this real life?
We're in Atlanta, man. Have you been paying attention?
Did you just call a football uniform a kit? Who are you?
I don't know.
Are you an alien? Did you invade Mike's body?
Soccer's taking over Atlanta right now. I guess I just got a little bit too involved in that. The Atlanta United, man, it's a big deal right now.
Raise your hand if that makes you want to vomit.
If I could take it back, I would, man. I'm sorry. Gosh.
Gary Lawn says we'd call it a gimmick, the purple jerseys. Not if you just wear them a little more often. All I'm saying is it's a good-looking jersey. I'd love to hear from more LSU fans on that in our comment section here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. All right, final topic here, topic number 10 on our 1st and 10. So I guess maybe the South Carolina-Texas A&M game's got a little more spice than we may have realized. I did not remember in the past that Will Muschamp apparently took a shot at College Station, Texas. Now, these two teams, they used to play each other every year. I think they still do. I think A&M and South Carolina are cross-division matchup that play every single season. I think they actually even play for a trophy, which is sort of strange to think about. But I believe they do play for some sort of trophy. Nonetheless, I guess Muschamp took a shot at College Station, Texas, saying that if you've been there once, you never want to go there again. Well, apparently, Kevin Sumlin has clapped back, as the kids like to say on social media. Here's a little tweet from Brent Zerneman, who covers Texas A&M, who says that Sumlin on his radio show about Will Muschamp, we all know how much he loves College Station. We need to give him a College Station welcome. Does that add a little more spice to this game for you?
I think it absolutely does. I love that Kevin Sumlin said this, and it wasn't like he called him out. It wasn't in his weekly press conference. This is just in a radio show, and it's very small and very, he didn't go out over a ton of things. He says, you know what? We know how much he loves it here. Let's give him a College Station welcome. It does add a little spice for me. I mean, a game that usually would not be at the forefront of my weekend, it kind of moves it up the schedule a little bit to me, to where I'm probably going to pay attention at least a little bit when these two teams square off, because I do want to see what kind of ovation he's getting.
Well, the truth is, and Josh Conk in the comment section says that if someone loses, he's going to lose his job. It may be one of those deals for him the rest of the season where he's coaching every week to kind of hold on here. But I kind of agree with you that I don't know if what Sumlin says here makes the game more interesting. I just think the game in itself is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think Texas A&M may actually still be okay for all the hand-wringing and Josh Conkles of the world saying that someone's about to get fired. The truth is that A&M may still finish over its predicted season win total by the time it's all said and done. The UCLA game gets further and further in the rearview mirror. All these close wins were still wins. A&M may be okay. And South Carolina, in the shadow of losing Deebo Samuel to injury, maybe the close call against Louisiana Tech, maybe they shake that off, and Carolina's still kind of okay here. I think this game's actually, on its own right, a fairly decent game.
I agree with you, and I especially agree with you about Texas A&M. After they lost that game at UCLA, I said that Kevin Sumlin needed to sit these guys down and make them understand that every goal they might have had before the season started is still in front of them. And I think if we're going to give Auburn the benefit of the doubt and talk about how much we love Auburn and how much that team's improved and how much they're finding their footing, then we have to try to give a little bit of that doubt to Texas A&M, because they're in a similar situation. They go on the road and lose to a UCLA team by a hair, and all of a sudden have had these meager wins the last few weeks. And I'm not saying they're the best, they're on the same level. I'm not saying Texas A&M is what Auburn is. But if we're going to give these teams the benefit of the doubt, these teams also have their goals in front of them.
Tony Conticello in the comment section says that South Carolina's going to be garbage the rest of the year. Are you putting that much on the Deebo Samuel injury that because he's gone, Big part of their offense, both special teams as well. Remember, he had like 2 kick return touchdowns in the first 2 games. Are they garbage without Deebo Samuel?
I don't think they're garbage. I think what scares you about that is that they were a passing team, and they had to be with Jake Bentley at the helm, and they don't have the offensive line to really hold up and get a ton of rushing yards. To me, as an offensive lineman, that's what's always led to consistency. That's why I feel really good about where Georgia and Alabama are at. If you're not going to be able to run the ball, then you have to have that number 1 wide receiver outside, and they're still seemingly searching for a guy to take over for him.
By the way, referencing your soccer comment a moment ago, calling the football uniforms the kits, which is what the cool kids call the soccer uniforms. Greg Steele says, don't worry, Mike, BA said a lot dumber things than that. Listen, y'all are brutal to me sometimes. I try to read all these comments during the show, and y'all just brutalize me one day after the other.
Oh, yeah.
Just one day after the other.
That deserves a like. But I got a couple of shout-outs here, Atlanta United on here. So it's a big deal around town right now, man. You got to get in with the kids.
Lord.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, we got a funny champion of life. We'll do that for you coming in a moment. Before that, though, that is soccer fan Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, entertainment your way. And before we get to our champion of life, let's do our AT&T look ahead. And after y'all were mean to me, I shouldn't do a public service announcement. I'm going to try to help y'all out for a minute, because here is something that you're probably not thinking about for Friday. For our look ahead, I actually want to remind you, we have 2 games on Friday, not Saturday and not Thursday. Thursday's got a pretty crowded slate as well. But 2 games on Friday this week that involve top 25 teams. These are not SEC teams, but they're top 25 nonetheless. It's our AT&T look ahead for today. Miami against Duke, and then late USC and Washington State. And you degenerates that like to go out all night long and, drink and gamble and things like that, you'll be able to get your bet in time at my bookie for USC Washington State, and that'll be a pretty good Friday night, turning into an early Saturday morning. That's not bad to get Miami on the road at Duke, out of the Pac-12, Washington State, USC. It's not a bad Friday night.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and give you a hot take for this Friday night game. I think the Sam Darnold Heisman hype train starts to get derailed this Friday night. I think I like Washington State to win this game. I think Mike Leach has got a lot of things clicking up right now. USC gets their first loss Friday night.
That is a hot take. Good stuff there from Mike Johnson. All right, here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, we look to close out our show the same way every day. Butch Jones looks for champions of life. We look for champions of life here as well. And today it's found right here within the friendly confines of the SEC, courtesy of our friends over at Barstool Sports. Take a look at this LSU fan, rabid and upset with Syracuse, last week's opponent. That's not that unusual. What makes this fan a little more unusual is his age. Take a look at this. So what I can't decide here is this an example of SEC dad raising his son right? And by the way, I love the scream there at the end. Is this an SEC dad raising his son right? Is this troubling? I can only imagine what someone who's not an SEC football fan must think about everybody kind of happy and cheering as this son just berates a Syracuse fan in the stands there in Baton Rouge. What must the folks from upstate New York have thought about that who traveled down to LSU for the game? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't know if the Southern hospitality was there from that young man. I think he had a lot of anger in his eyes. But I tend to do think this is an SEC dad raising his son right. I know that's a scary thought for a lot of people. I've sat in dang near those same seats in Baton Rouge and had almost that same welcome when I went into the game last year. So I don't think it's anything new for these LSU fans to see something like that.
Yeah, I love how the dad just got him right there on his shoulders. He's relaxed. He's hanging out, and the kid's just going to work.
He's just letting him have it.
Hey, speaking of work, we'll be back again for one more day of work for us tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope you'll be there for it. If you missed a portion of today's show, you want to check out the podcast. It's available for you on iTunes. Just make sure you subscribe, give us a rating and review. That's a big help. Share this show with your friends on Facebook. That helps us as well. We'll see you again 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.